be here now. Just be here now.
Welcome to the Road Home podcast with Ethan Nichtern. Join Ethan as he and his guests explore the Buddhist path as it relates to art, culture, activism, politics, Western psychology, and more. If you'd like to support Ethan's podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/Ethan.
So, hi, everyone. This is Ethan Nichtern for the Road Home podcast. I'm really excited to be here today with an author and dharma teacher whose work I've been following for a little while, Osho Zenju Earthlyn Manuel, whose new book I really have been reading and loving, The Shamanic Bones of Zen. So, Osho, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So before we start recording, I told you that my first question, especially when it's a Buddhist or Buddhist person, is to ask about how you got into meditation or dharma. And that led to a long conversation about names and titles. But you talk about this in several of your books, but can you just give us maybe a shorthand of how your journey with Zen and dharma began?
Okay, so it's always an interesting story for me. I always kind of, in one way, it's like, I don't really know how to swim, but I will jump into deep water. And so every gateway has been deep water. And I didn't really have an interest in Buddha or Buddhism, like a lot of people that I know did. I had no idea who Buddha was or what Buddhism meant. I would hear people talk about it. And this is when I was a Christian and when I was... I also practiced some African religions, but I actually was introduced at 11 years old through the Soka Gakkai because they used to be in a shopping mall. And that's the first time I really heard about it. And it sounded very interesting because I was always interested in new things and anything to not have to go to church sometimes. So, so this might be an interesting place to do. So I ended up maybe 30 years later, almost 30 years later in Nichtern Buddhism and Soka Gakkai International, the lay organization, which is separate from the priest organization. The Nichiren Shoshu. So I practiced there. Some friends were practicing, and I didn't ask to go at all. I was not interested, and they brought me, to a meeting, and I went, and I was afraid of it. It looked like a cult, and it wasn't. And I was there for 15 years. And then I found myself in a 3-week intensive. And I remember just walking in the Zendo at San Francisco Zen Center and realizing I had left Nichtern and that I really, they chant there quite a bit. It was a great practice of shamatha concentration. And I left. I was a leader there, but they don't have teachers, they have leaders. I was a leader there. But I left kind of energetically. I didn't say I'm leaving. And I wanted the silence that Zen offered. And of course, is always this path of seeking transformation and healing from one's suffering. So that's kind of always the obvious. But mine felt like a collective, more of a collective search or solution, collective transformation and healing for not just people who are marginalized and oppressed, but for the world. I think I was always interested in that. And drove me into activism as well, religion and activism. So
I'm wondering, because you talked about jumping in at the deep end, which, my studies of Zen, I've been to the San Francisco Zen Center or Village Zendo here in New York. It does feel like, I mean, you could say the same thing about Tibetan or Tantric Buddhism, but it does feel like Zen and the Japanese Zen lineages do have this quality of you jump into the ritual of practice at the deep end. So what was that 3-week intensive like?
It was crazy. It was ridiculous for for it to be the first thing for me to do. I did not know that they had one day sit. I had no idea. That's how new I was. And here I was. It was recommended. So I guess the person who recommended it thought I could do it. So it's modeled after their Tassajara schedule, which is very intense. And I remember struggling in the Buddha hall, sitting on the floor, I think, trying to learn how to tie my bowls, for oryoki. And I was the last one there, and I was there at least an hour after the class, still trying to figure out how to tie my bowls. And so I got it. I wasn't going to get it in that moment. But it felt, as it was moving along, that ultimate silence day after day after day, even though we did have classes and we had dharma talks, and you could get a practice discussion or interview, as in some people's traditions. And I just found so much about myself, that what I was holding in my heart, that before then I saw as anger and rage. And during the 3-week intensive, I found that it was grief. And a great amount of grief. And so the healing and transformation, and being in a collective space, but not talking, just breathing together, our lives, moving that way, just created an environment I've never had before. I was just, I had meditated by myself, but in community, it was different. And then having the schedule. So I came out of there changed. I still see and feel that change. Can I describe it completely? Not really. People who saw me later were like, wow, you could see what happened to you in 3 weeks, like in your face. And I was like, oh, so maybe finally, all that pensiveness and whatever I was holding, maybe that was gone. I don't know. But I felt different. And so I kept at it.
Yeah. So the themes of your writing and your story as both a Dharma student and teacher that I keep picking up on, especially in your earlier book, The Way of Tenderness and The Shamanic Bones of Zen, is your experience in the Black church is a big part of it. Your life as a scholar, right? And so there's a lot of scholarship in this, and seemingly like what other scholars missed about the history of Zen, or Western scholars you feel have maybe missed or not fully acknowledged about the history of Zen. And then the mysticism and the indigenous wisdom, the mysticism that comes from ritual and ceremony. So it feels like there's a sense that these things have been kind of torn apart, especially the kind of more secular psychological approach to these teachings versus the spiritual or mystical. So can you talk about those different sides of yourself? And your work?
I think I'm very sensitive to fragmentation. I think I am a person who sees everything whole. I think I always have, seen a whole within places that, people might see individuals or parts or things like that. And when I see things, it amazes me when it comes together and it's something that no one's talked about, that this is here too, So I think because I came from, church, I like the rituals in church. Communion is one of those rituals. Baptism, I couldn't wait to get baptized because I wanted that ritual.
Didn't want to go to church, but wanted to be baptized.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want, our church lasted too long. I think it was too many hours. I wanted to talk to the preacher about that, I think a whole lot of people had liked it to be shorter. All my cousins were Catholic, and so because everybody from Louisiana is Catholic, usually Black, or is a Catholic state, and I don't think people really realize how Catholic some of the Black people were, and so anyway, I liked what was being talked about in church, like life and death. And so that was interesting to me. Because I had lost a friend when we were 6 years old, and it was a shock to me because I didn't know children died, and I think it perturbed me and still does today. That I still have that feeling like, oh my God, I could die at any time. So I think that also doing ritual and ceremony in indigenous cultures, African and Native, helped me when I got to Zen to be there. It was easy to be in that 3-week intensive because it was like you walk into the Zendo, you do it this way, you bow that way, you eat this way, you chant this chant. And that was just what I knew already. So it was very easy. I already had a concentration practice from Nichtern, and chanting. I already knew how to chant in that sense. So it was a fit. It was an easy fit. Now, they weren't talking about the Zen as a ritual or ceremony. As a matter of fact, sometimes it felt like I could end up in the principal's office for not doing it right, or something, like people would get very angry. Oh my God, why are you going that way? And I never, it was kind of comical to me, that part, that was, I understood the intensity, but the intensity was out of context. That it was out of the context of reverence. It was stuck in something, and I could see it, and sometimes felt, and I have done that, protected some people from it because I said, "Oh, they're going to get in trouble," and I just wanted to protect them, in that practice. For me, when it happened to me, it was just funny. I would end up laughing. I think that probably was perturbing to them. Like if I didn't cut the carrots right, or, I would just kind of just chuckle, and the kids chuckle at myself, or bow too many times, and I would just laugh. I thought it was funny, if I overdid it, but for some people it could end up feeling like they're being disciplined, and are they in the military or something like that, which is there.
Yeah.
And that feeling is there. And that's why I wrote the book, The Shamanic Bones of Zen, because I felt like even if you don't teach it as shamanic, or even say this is ritual, this is ceremony, but that you could feel within the body, the work and the movement was reverent, I think that we would get more out of the time spent there in practice. And I think that with all traditions, all Buddhist traditions, and maybe all traditions, spiritual and religious traditions, but I can't speak to all of them because that would not be appropriate. But so I speak to Zen.
Right.
And so I think that there probably was a time, I say it in the book, where in trying to bring Buddhism into a country that's predominantly Christian, meant they wanted to probably, and also the New Age coming into existence, wanted to distinguish themselves from New Age witchcraft and everything, so they could fit into a culture or society that was Christian. And so I could see how that may happen. On the other hand, I also could see that some of the masters, Zen masters, or any master of any tradition, could have been Theravada neat too, that they kept some of those rituals and traditions, probably seeing that it might not work for Westerners. It might not be, they might not be reverent with the ritual, or some of the forms that are part of the practice.
Yeah. Well, this basic fragmentation between the spiritual or religious, and I don't know if you consider those the same word. Some people distinguish between those two. But and on one side, and the scientific or the secular, right? That's a European thing, right? And so then that comes into America, and there's this. Well, we say there is, but it says "In God We Trust" on every courtroom. But
right, and we trust in God's money. So that's why it's on the money. So and only on the money. So science is as old as all indigenous people, and they even have affirmed that the Dogon tribe in Africa knew all of what was in all the planets without any instruments to measure any of it. And science is, to me, this is personal, and maybe some other people believe this too. It's just a way of concretizing spirit and affirming spirit and affirming reverence and affirming the mystical. And saying that it is so. So now we get little doodads put in our head to see what meditation is doing. So we could write it up and say, this is what meditation is doing without, someone like myself saying, this is what this is what the 3-week intensive did for me, around rage and grief. That, that could be measured, technically. So in one way, it's Western in a sense and secular because it like you said, been separated from the mystical and the spiritual, but that it is that anyway, and every time I see maybe a discussion around science and Buddhism or secular Buddhism, it always circles back to the beginning, to the root. It has to circle back to the root. And so are we still interested and are uncomfortable with the practice still, despite all the years that it's been here, still uncomfortable with the bones or the root of the practice or any practice, I'm not just saying. And I do see religion and spirituality a little bit different, but they have some of the same roots. Right. As well. So they came from something long ago. And so we just have an overlay on it. I don't think there's anything wrong with science or measuring it. I do have a Ph.D., so I have done research. That's another one of my titles. Dr. Manuel and
Dr. Osho. Can we call you
Dr. Osho? Dr. Osho, Reverend Sensei. And in the African traditions call me Iya. So I have a lot of titles. So wherever I am, and venerable is another one. People call me as well venerable.
People call me vulnerable. So
I'm vulnerable and venerable. Yeah, I am vulnerable. I feel vulnerable all the time, especially when I'm talking. I feel very vulnerable, but more vulnerable than venerable. But I think that it's only in our minds that this fragmentation and separation is, which is interesting because we always are talking about the oneness and the of the relative and absolute all the time. Mm-hmm. But yet, when we live out our lives and speak it, it's a language problem. But when we live out our lives, we don't see it. We don't bring all of it in. So some people, they say, well, I'm not going to be religious because there's no God. Why are you chanting? Why are you meditating? There's no need in taking any of this on. And I felt very, and I have been criticized for being a priest and a Zen priest and wearing robes. And
what was the criticism?
That why would, religious people are, forcing people or influencing people's minds into a particular way of thinking and being. One is to be passive, another is to, they talk peace. And so they're not interested in the world. And people wearing robes think of themselves as better than others. I have even been caught within Zen Center from other students who, come in who haven't practiced, they're new, that I'm part of the corporation of Zen because I have a corporate robe. And all kinds of things. People have all kind of ideas about, religion and clergy. I went to I'm a writer and been a writer and author long before I entered Buddhism. So that's why there's so many books. I'm not just going, oh, I think I'll write another Buddhist book, like we need more and more. I'm just a writer. That's who I am and what I do, what I enjoy. And so I was taking a course, going to take a writing course. And the teacher said, I almost didn't let you into the course. It was memoir writing. And she said, it was my first time hearing this. She said, because you're clergy. And I was like, wow, I never thought of myself that way. And she had been abused by Catholic clergy. And I was like, I never saw myself in that place. But she opened my eyes. Of course, we became really good friends. And she said, she was so glad she said yes, because I was a very big part of the class and helping, creativity flow with everyone together collectively. And she was, shocked and surprised. But it really opened my eyes to what it meant. And it didn't stop me, and it doesn't stop me from being who I am and wearing my robes. I do talk about what robes are to me. I don't know. I might have said a little bit about that maybe in Shamanic Bones. Mm-hmm. A way of stripping away the world and being in that, showing my commitment to spirit and spirituality and not a commitment to the religion of Zen. So even in the book, I'm not completely talking about the religion of Zen as much as the spirituality of Zen and of Buddhism.
Right. Well, part of what feels like kind of mushed together in that, whatever terminology we use between religion and spirituality and mysticism, like when you talk about sort of an overarching narrative that there is this punitive creator who made you and made you bad, by the way, somehow,
a lot of sin. Yeah.
A lot of sin. It's like, why aren't we mad at that guy then?
Some people are.
Right, exactly. But and then in those systems, maybe some people feel that if you have, like, it seemed like you kind of laughed off the various precision and or rigidity of the Zen forms that you didn't always know exactly whether to go left or right. But if you go ahead.
I laughed off the way they looked at it and talked about it, and the way it was felt less reverent and more corporal.
Right.
Punishment if you don't do it right. Like I was in school, so that was kind of funny to me in that way, but not the actual the formality of it was important, but not in the formality in the way they were holding formality, right? There's many ways to hold forms, and every spiritual practice, every religious practice has form. Every single one. There's not a one without. Even if it's a new one you're creating today, it's going to have a form.
But,
no matter what.
So that way of looking at spirituality or religion, like punitive creator, and the forms that would come from that, it's very different from like an indigenous approach where the earth has spirit, a person has ancestors, has lineage.
But there are
to support.
There are like 10,000 more forms at a Sundance than there are at Zen Center. Like a lot.
Yeah.
There are a lot of do not do's. Oh no, don't. A lot. There's there's patriarchy, there's racism, there's sexism, there's homophobia. All that's at Zen Center was at the African communities and in the Lakota communities, because we're all in that world, the same world. So even though the practice speaks to more than indigenous practice, hold this earth as the center of the practice, the forms in which that are built from there, which doesn't, like I said, it doesn't matter even if you're in Wiccan. There is a form built from how you're going to engage the earth. There's a ritual, there's a ceremony, and they all have form. Yeah. And so, but if you do the form without realizing, and we do this in Zen, right? Without realizing there's an emptiness in them if you don't understand the true substance of the form. And what the form is to help engage you more with the earth, which is what Buddhism is supposed to do too. Buddhism is an earth-based practice, and so we're to get more in tune with the earth. Now you might say, oh, you got to get in tune with your teacher. Well, okay, that could be one, as long as the teacher's in tune with the earth, right? And we find out if the teacher isn't, and then you're following something that whatever that teacher is, bringing. My teacher, I don't think necessarily she was in tune with the earth. I saw Buddhism or Zen the way I did, but she was excited and into the forms, and in the ceremonies, it would excite her, and that was interesting to me. And so I wanted to see why she was so happy, and everybody else wasn't, and including myself, like, I don't know if that should be here and that kind of thing. And watching her be so excited about being at ceremonies and rituals, I watched, and she transmitted that to me without a word, without saying a word. It was just watching her, being with her, and feeling into what a bow can bring, or touching the earth. Like Thich Nhat Hanh is touching the earth. I really love that Thich Nhat Hanh's passing and continuation was shown to the world, because it actually, I told my students, I said, I want you to watch all of the ceremonies, all of them, because that is Zen. It's not in a book. It's not in anything. That's it. Just watch what they're doing. That's it. That's it. That's Buddhism, and the words are just there to stimulate us to bow deeper, to make the offerings to the ancestors, to understand life, the nature of life. All of the ceremonies are about that. And so the Dharma talks are very Western, and very much, I tell my students, a cherry on top. And, in the morning we chant, we bow, then every time it's time to talk, I just feel like, wow, I wish, we didn't have to, because that part is, we think we can talk our way into understanding the practice, and you can't. Right. That's why it doesn't work for many. It's like, well, I try to be loving and kind, and then this happens, do I have to be compassionate to this person, and this person did this and this? That's because everything is in their minds. You can't figure out compassion in your mind. You can't even be compassionate, even though we say it. I can't give it to you. I can't be compassionate to you. I can experience compassion, and hopefully in our being together and interrelated, that compassion will spill into your life from my heart. That's it. That's all. If I make an idea that I'm going to be compassionate to you, or I'm going to be loving and kind, that's my idea of loving and kind, my idea of compassion. And so, and you might do the same thing. And then we realize we have different ideas. And I go, well, that didn't feel loving. Or you go, oh, well, that didn't feel compassionate, And we do that. Like, okay, that didn't sound very Buddhist. And I've had people tell me that.
Oh, people tell me that all the time.
Yeah, that's not very Buddhist of you. And you're ordained. They really go for you, the juggler.
It's never Buddhists who say that, by the way.
No, it isn't. But because it's brought to the world in a particular way. So I always tell people, I said, do you think Thich Nhat Hanh was a perfect person? Yeah, of course, everybody thinks he was perfect. How could he not be perfect? Oh my God, he was a saint. No, he was a man. Yeah. And I bet you, if you talk to any other people, there was trouble.
Yeah.
There were problems,
Yeah.
And it's only real.
So I wonder, because you talked about there being, and with our hopefully growing understanding of how all of these systems, influence our world, influence our cultural, economic, political worlds, and also influence Buddhism. Like, I think, you could definitely say Asian Buddhism is completely influenced by patriarchy as a system. And then obviously that, you could say intellectual and Western psychology and whiteness then brings that into the US. But I wonder how that feels like it affects the need for rituals. Like, do the rituals need to change to be extracted from patriarchy, white centricity, or do we need to practice the rituals we've known in a different way?
The rituals, there's nothing wrong with the rituals. The rituals and ceremonies are not, unless you make it that way yourself, are not, which we do, and not necessarily oppressive or have patriarchy. And to tell you the truth, all spirituality and religion all over the world is heavy with patriarchy, heavy with oppression, heavy with misogynistic ideas, and on and on and on. And so, so what in the world, let's look at that. What has happened in the world in which that the pathways of our transformation and healing are seen to be owned by a particular kind of human being, that looks a particular way. So what has happened? And I've been in a lot of dialogues with people around this. Has been, very interesting. One person, I remember, this is the one story that stuck in the mind, that men took religion because they couldn't have a baby. They couldn't create a baby. And that was an interesting idea. So people are talking about, so they could get in this place of creation, but not that place of creation. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a very interesting idea. It stuck in my head. Another one was that the women gave away the religion. They had the religions in the spiritual past, and they gave them to the men. And that was interesting. I was like, and the guy asked who was the first woman that did that. And I was like, that it was uncomfortable. I'm not saying both ideas are uncomfortable, but it's just to look at how this permeates everywhere. So for me, being a person, a Black person, a queer person, disabled, everything, name it. I tell people I'm the poster child of oppression. And so name it, I'm in it. And I say it in the book, to be able to make offerings to ancestors in the midst of it all is profound to me. And that's what makes ritual and ceremony profound and transformative. If we're doing it in reverence and if everyone can participate in it. So that's also passing on the rituals and ceremonies to everyone. So that would be a change to everyone, not just, particular embodied person. Mm-hmm. This person's going to do better than that person, mm-hmm. But even if you change the embodiment of the person, say, do they have, you give it to someone who normally doesn't have power or normally are not part of making decisions and changing things, then nothing changes, in that way. They don't have input, So as a person that I am, the only input I can have on Zen is to write the Shamanic Bones of Zen.
It's a big influence.
That's it. But what if you're not a writer? What if you're not that type, and you look like me, and you're embodied in my way? You don't have the opportunity or the privilege to impact, religion or spirituality. So I think that that's important. And then what if you're not the one to impact it? There was a story of this person who was of color, and she was part of a community, and she was one of few, I guess, Black people. And they just picked her out to be the person to help them deal with diversity and, try to develop engagement and more people of color. The person destroyed the community. Because the person was Black doesn't mean that's the person. That's like saying, well, we need more Black surgeons. You're Black, here's a scalpel, go on, do the surgery. Right. And the person gets in there, oh no, whoa, so.
I'm thinking of a few Black politicians right now.
Yes, okay, there you go.
Herschel Walker, Clarence Thomas.
There you go. And, to them, it's no difference. To some people, that's okay, they're Black. We do have Black people. So our women, the women have more, patriarchal consciousness than a man. It's just, so really we're dealing with, particular consciousness development and training, and I think there's a lot of training that needs to go on to help even the rituals, even if you include Dharma talk, which it was a ritual. They used to do what's called teisho. Some Zen centers still call their talks teisho. And that's what the Japanese did. They did teishos. And teisho comes from a place of having sat so deep and so long and seeing and looking that when you speak, you're speaking from that place, that divine place, so that it's not a talk, it's a message from the earth. A message from the earth to the people. Those are the kind of talks all of us should be doing, no matter what the tradition is. So it should come from the bowing. It should come from the offering.
Yeah.
Those words, even when I write, I do sit and try to bring forth that when I'm writing. It doesn't always, I'm not successful all the time, but I try. My best. Yeah.
Osho, can I ask a little bit more about ancestors? Because it feels so important. So, and also had a guest on, a friend of mine a few podcasts back, Maud Newton, who's a cisgender white woman who wrote a very long researched book called part memoir and part sort of social science called Ancestor Trouble. And it's the social science part is about sort of our newfound obsession with genealogy and ancestry.com, but it's also about really looking through her family ancestry and finding out that she had ancestors who were slave owners and trying to reckon with that. And so, I mean, when I hear somebody from an indigenous perspective, or Lama Rod Owens or yourself talk about ancestors or some of the like tantric visualization practices, there's a sense of it being supportive and kind of like fully supportive of your own being in this moment, that you're carrying forth something good and strong and wise. So
you're carrying forth everything. You are also carrying forth slave mentality. You're also carrying forth the alcoholism. You're also carrying forth the murderers. You're carrying forth all of it, and you can't help it because you were born of it. You were born through it. And then I was helpful because people have been asking me a lot about it, and I was thinking maybe I should write a book on ancestors as well. Is that ancestors are not only your bloodline, it's your spirit line, or you can your spiritual path line, or it could be the earth or the moon, or anything that was here before you is an ancestor. The plants, the trees, the metal, all that was here, water, all ancestors, that's all here. However, we really are definitely caught at this kind of human bloodline, ancestors. And literally, I have some struggle with my own bloodline from Buddha on my transmission to my own becoming a teacher. There's some names I wanted to cross out, and so, but I didn't.
Meaning in the Dharma lineage.
Yeah, in the Zen, my own Zen lineage. I wanted to I don't want that teacher on there.
Yeah.
And
I know what that feels like.
Yeah, so I was like, yeah, but that teacher taught your teacher. So, and that teacher brought something to you, not the same thing, maybe the things that teacher did that I don't like. I mean, I'm really embarrassed of it. I don't even speak the name. And upset about it. It's still an upsetting thing. So it might be good for me to write about that. But when you're an ancestor, you're no longer a person. They're not people. So we got to get to that. They're not people. And the only way that they're people is inside of us and how they affected, impacted us. So if we're dealing with our psychological, emotional impact of a person that has come and gone, then that is a psychological, sociological engagement and endeavor. That is not, to me, the realm of spirit, the realm of Buddhism, the realm of anything outside of, you need to get help. Now, we all have somebody, all of us, we all have groups of people. I remember being in a ceremony. It was with an African woman from Ghana. It was a multicultural, mixed race. And one of the women came to me and she said, I'm just so sorry for what my ancestors did. I'm just so upset of who they are. I don't want to be them, and they were of a religion too that, did a lot of things. And so I said, I'm sorry for what my ancestors did too. Because my ancestors, we did sacrifice a lot of our own people in order to be who we are today, to be free, and did it in ceremony, and so it's known, the tribalism and how it really was not, everything's not beautiful about being African or anything. It is not. It can't be. And it's not. That's just romanticizing, the human condition and acting like nothing happened. So maybe we didn't do it toward the white people necessarily, but our people did something and we are living that. And so there's a new thing, it's trending, intergenerational trauma. And a lot of folks are who are not healing professions, in the healing profession, including myself. I'm not in that healing profession. I do not have a degree in psychology or therapy. I do have my Ph.D. is in transformative learning and integral studies, which does touch on it. But I'm not a healing professional. So when people come to me to talk about trauma, I send them someplace else. But when you want to come and talk about how to practice with the trauma, then I can do that. That's what we do, as in Buddhism, is how to engage all that has disrupted and hurt and, changed our lives. We can't go back and change that. Yeah. But it is in us and it's there for a purpose. And it's such a simple thing. I tell people, we hear it all the time. There is, and there must be mud in order for the lotus to grow. It has to be. And there's always going to be the horrible thing yesterday, the horrible thing today, and the horrible thing that's coming. So what do we do with horror? What do we do with things that jump up on us? Collectively and personally, because it's going to do that. I know that myself. I have had some horrendous suffering that I don't even tell people because it's too much for them to take. That's too much for the other people. That's how I feel. It's going to blow them out the water. I've seen people just like, oh my God, when I tell them. So I don't, and it involves weapons. It involves my being hurt. It involves abuse, not sexual, physical abuse, being just, so it's just to talk about that and know that I'm not the only human being, not even in my lineage, my blood lineage, spiritual lineage, even a tree has been hurt in the way that I have been hurt. That there's some reason in our living that these things are present. And I think they're present to be used. Racism is here to open our eyes. If we don't open our eyes, and that doesn't only mean open to, oh, we shouldn't be racist. What makes us racist? And even inside ourselves, this is from the Buddhist perspective, inside ourselves, not going out and fixing all the races. That's another kind of work and job. It's not Buddhism. It's not. And so people are doing it, but it's not. That's not what it is. That's not what we're there for. I think we can speak to it, but we're not there to erase it. There's no way I'm going to erase the racism of a 70-year-old institution in which it's embedded, under the wood of the building. It's not my job. My job is to come in and become awake to it and to come awake to the nature of life. So in understanding that, I can see that cycle in human beings, that conditioning in human beings, and I can see that conditioning in myself. I can see the poison and how the poison works, and so that when we're in conversation, we don't dwindle into the same place of pain and woundedness. So one of my students was talking about being hurt by, going into this whole thing about whiteness. And there's so much language around it now. And going on. And our Sanghas are Black. And I said, where is the white person right now? Where is the person? And she said, I said, yeah. Person, she pointed to herself. The white person's in you. That's why you're talking about that. White people. It's in your consciousness, your mind consciousness. And it keeps hurting you, And you keep trying to cut it out. But it's in you. Because if you cut it out, you're going to end up cutting something of yourself out. You think you're cutting out the bad, but there's no bad and good. There just is. This is the hard thing to take in about life. It just is. And so, so when she got that, there were no white people in the room. It stopped the conversation, right? There was no need. Then she would have to talk about herself. And could she? No, because we're all taught right now to talk about white supremacy. We all can talk about it. Even 7-year-olds can do it now. So that's great. I think we understand it. I believe in critical race theory. Been around long before everyone got upset. I don't understand. I'm not understanding what's happening there, but it's old as Methuselah.
It's not what they're upset about. Just
okay. But it's like, what is this problem with critical race theory? So anyway, the point is all of this we can speak. And I think we've got more and more articulate about it. And now we're stuck. We're very articulate about it. And now even you go into the Buddhist centers or you go someplace, it doesn't even have to be a Buddhist center. It could be any spiritual place. And all of a sudden, the talk on white supremacy is more important than the ceremony. To me, the ceremony is what's going to transform it, but we don't trust that.
Right.
Some people say, why should we trust Buddhism? Why should we trust this practice? And it's not why, it's do you trust it? And if you don't, you should go to what you trust. I do believe that. Go where you trust it and you enjoy it. Buddhism is not required. Please do not become Buddhists.
Yeah.
It's not required. Meditation is not required. It's not for everybody. You may come awake drumming. You may come awake drumming. So I think it's not important, to me that we come in and then we have to get everything fixed so that we can practice. It's not going to happen. We can't. It's like going into a relationship and fixing the other person before you can have one. Okay, I'm going to fix you. You got to get better. So we can be together. Like only one person needs to get better at it, rather than everybody. And so I feel that we're starting to lose ground in that of trying to correct something that's deep in the earth, around the world. The Black people did not get were not allowed to get on the train in the Ukraine.
Right.
So it's everywhere. So it's something larger than ourselves. But how can we use it? Do we become hopeless and helpless? Or how can we use it to come awake, to see? And do we trust that an individual can affect the people around themselves? Like if you came awake and I came awake, not understanding, we both of us can talk white supremacy. We could talk it, but what did we come awake to in our experience of it that changes how we are? Not that we're more smiley or we say hello more to, Black people or whatever, or, we're like, oh, yes, I love, people who are transgender, not that, but something deeper than that. And we're not there yet. We don't know what it is because we keep stopping at this place in which we think we know how to do it. Our strategy of loving kindness, our strategy of compassion, because we stop there. But the only way to get past it, to me, is in the ceremony. I can be in ceremony with a person who I may not even know hate me. I may not even know. They might be bowing right next to me, because that's what we can do. And that action, and when we bow together, that action can change the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It actually can change the moment. Now, we may have to do a whole lot touching the earth, for it to change. And we may be afraid of the change. We may be afraid that if we change, somebody's going to get, taken off the hook. We've heard that story. You want to keep people hooked to make sure they know, you're not going to get away from it. Mm-hmm. But that's a lot of work to keep a wiggling fish hooked.
So, Osho, maybe one final question, because you have a lot of people, especially I think over the pandemic, starting, a meditation practice on their own or maybe in online spaces. Mm-hmm. Is there one, do you give people, obviously, coming to a Sangha and participating in ceremony, but if somebody wanted to just start with one little piece of ceremony, say in their home practice, is there one way that you give an intro to ceremony? Like, is it bowing? Is it having an altar or shrine? What's the first step of bringing a little more ritual into a person's practice?
The first and foremost, and this did get transmitted, that's what I said, what actually did get transmitted, that to everyone, the Western world, which, yay, that the main ritual that got transmitted was meditation and is meditation. It is Zazen. So the first thing is to sit. Is to sit upon the earth, and that's what the Buddha did. The living Buddha sat upon the earth, and all the Buddhists before him, and they were all genders, sat upon the earth to receive what the earth had. So when you sit in your house, you're not just sitting on your pretty cushion or, oh, this is great. I should do this for 45 minutes. No, you just sit. You may grow into 45 minutes. You may not. When I first sat, it was 5 or 10 minutes. And you just sit. You're sitting upon the earth, which you never do. We always walk in and sit on our sofa or whatever, or sit in a chair. We don't sit on the earth. We don't put our feet on the earth. We don't even connect because we don't think it's going to do anything. We just don't really feel that. But that is the first thing. The next is to make offerings. It doesn't have to be an altar. You can actually just put an orange in a candle, and that's it. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's just an offering to what is, from the earth. So we have the fire. All of it represents the elements. The fire, the incense. If you use incense, just means it's from the earth. It's the wood. You can smell the tree without having to go find an agarwood tree. You can use flowers if incense is troubling. Things of the earth. A stone, a rock, a piece of grass. It's just honoring that all of this was here for you, and you're honoring, acknowledging it, that you're not here alone. The only reason why you and I are talking together was because of the earth, because of the people who came before us, who actually literally brought us together at this moment in this time that we are speaking right now. I believe it. This is not a fluke. It's not just because you had a podcast, and it's not just because I'm a Zen priest or that I'm Buddhist. There's something much larger working that has brought us together today. So just sit. That's the first. Nothing extravagant. Nothing, beyond your capacity.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really wanted to just take a moment to give another shout out to Osho Zenju's new book, The Shamanic Bones of Zen, as well as some of your earlier books, especially The Way of Tenderness is dear to my heart. And if anybody's more interested in Osho's work, you can just go to zenju.org, zenju.org. Osho, thanks so much for being on the Road Home podcast. It's a real pleasure to be with you and listen to you and talk to you. And I hope you'll come back sometime, even though you said you hate your own voice. I
will come back, but I won't listen.
Okay. Well, I will.
Okay. All right. Okay. I won't listen later. I listen as I'm talking, not later. All right.
Of course. Okay. So for the Road Home podcast, this is Ethan Nichtern. We'll see you next time.